we do that at home. We talk about, hey, you did this really hard thing and you had to do it. Like, God didn't do it for you, but he came and met you in the middle. And it's that, I can do all things through Christ. It's like, it starts with I. Like, I have to take that step and do it. And so empowering them to talk about their faith and have that be something that's normal, but also realize that, like, in a lot of ways, the message of the cross is going to be foolishness to those who don't believe. Like, in a lot of ways, they're going to be on the outside, and being a little bit more okay with that.
Jenny, so good to be with you. Hey, let's talk about public school. And I know a lot of parents, actually I've been asked a lot by parents when I've been on the road. I was just at a conference and some parents said, hey, how do I equip my Christian child to thrive in the public school system? How do I equip them? And so what would you answer to that parent?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because for me and our family, we're pretty big public school proponents. Like, I'm very big on parents making their own decisions for their kids, but for us, it's been a good choice. And both my husband and I were raised in public schools, but it comes with a lot of caveats and it comes with a lot of cons, which of course we know we see in any school. I think a big part of it is, how much are you feeding into them at home? What are the habits? What are the things that they're seeing you do at home that they can then carry with them? I mean, I was talking to my newly seventh grader, right? Literally last night about, we were going through some clothes things of like, honey, we just went through your clothes and now like we will only wear like 4 shirts. What are we doing? And she, well, I just don't want to be made fun of, and that's just, it's so big to them, like remembering that their world is somewhat small, but it's huge to them. And so feeding in some of those Christian components at home, I think just really carries with them to the school. And as we know with the different ages, and that's something we can talk about developmentally, like how you can equip teenagers in a different way, because they need to start creating some of that self-advocacy and sense of self, whereas the younger kids, they don't necessarily care as much as the older kids do. So to me, I think it's about home habits is the place to start.
Yeah, are there some practical ones that you guys practice throughout the years?
Yeah.
Stage and stage?
Yeah, I think this is going to sound cheesy, but it's true. Like, we just talk about faith a lot. Like, we talk about what the Lord's doing in our life. Like
at dinner? Or
just all the time, in the car. And that's just something, that's what a lot of evangelical people will say, just talk to non-Christians that way. Like, hey, God's been doing this in my life, or here's how God is. Actually, don't like when people say God showed up. Like, he doesn't show up. He's there all the time.
Right there,
but like, here's how God like made himself very powerful in my life. And so we do that at home. We talk about, hey, you did this really hard thing and you had to do it. Like, God didn't do it for you, but he came and met you in the middle. And it's that, I can do all things through Christ. It's like, it starts with I. Like, I have to take that step and do it. And so empowering them to talk about their faith and have that be something that's normal, but also realize that, like, in a lot of ways, the message of the cross is going to be foolishness to those who don't believe. Like, in a lot of ways, they're going to be on the outside, and being a little bit more okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, all day long, kids in public school are experiencing all kinds of different things. They're not all bad. Some great interactions with friends, some other things that they experience that maybe they're trying to process, and sometimes on their own. I think for us in our home, we had just the intentionality of having conversation. We made our family meal times a priority. Sometimes I'd see that my daughter was upset, or my son, and I'd say, hey, let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
Let's just go talk. Clearly something has happened.
That one-to-one.
Yeah, the one-to-one, that was another rhythm. Any other ones that you can think of that would be just easy to implement?
For us, we drive a lot because our kids are really active. So for us, it's the car.
Oh, the car.
They're kind of stuck with us in the car, right? And there's a day where I'm sure we'll be like, oh, they can drive themselves. And I think I'll be sad, probably, because you lose a lot of time. But having that car time to really do those one-on-one check-ins, like, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything your dad and I can do to support you? For example, even one of the things, my husband read Jim Daly's book on fathering, the parenting. Yeah. And one of the huge things he took away from that was the check-ins with his sons. Like, what can I do better? Almost like a boss. What could I do better?
Right.
What am I doing really well?
The report card.
Yeah.
The dad report card.
Right. And so checking in with them and saying, Is there something we can do to support you more? How can we come along beside you? Because as they age, it's really more about us coming alongside than it is us advocating for them.
And it's not about being kid-centric.
Right.
It's about allowing for the child to feel validated.
Right.
And heard and listened to. And sometimes it takes, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
Am I there? Am I in step? Am I listening to you? Am I present? And there may be one child that says, yeah, you're there all the time. And the other one that says, no, you don't listen
You
to
don't
me at
bat
all.
1,000
Yeah.
most of the time,
That's right.
unfortunately.
And so different personalities are in
Yeah.
the home. Now, the public school system has a lot of things happening. One of them being curriculums. And,
Yeah.
we know that there are many pressures coming at our kids, from homework to disagreements with friends to bullies potentially. Let's talk about that. How do we support our kids in those difficult places? What do you think, Jenny?
I think, the biggest issue, the elephant in the room, is the LGBTQ issue as far as the public school stuff. It's getting younger and younger. Even amongst evangelicals, there's different opinions on that. I even had to talk to my 7th grader. Her art teacher is, we're not sure, we think non-binary. And so we had that conversation where I put it in her court, and not all parents would do that, and that's okay. This isn't the only way to do it. I said, what do you want to do? Do you want to do art bad enough to stay in the class? She goes, I really want to do art. I said, okay, well, what about the teacher? She goes, I feel uncomfortable about it. I said, okay, so what do you need us to do? She's like, I want to do art. And I was like, okay. If you become uncomfortable or it becomes too much, her guidance counselor luckily is a Christian, which is wonderful. I said, we'll have a conversation. But I left that in her court to say, going back to what we said, how can I come alongside? Is there something I need to do as the parent? But really, age-wise, she's almost 13, that's appropriate. Let her make that final decision. With my younger ones, I think it really is more about that identity of saying, like, constant reiteration of who they are, of their true identity, their skills. Not just, you are good at this, but I will say, like, you are Landon, my son, like the way God talks to us, like, you are my son. And you were created with these things, and that makes you awesome. It's not just what you do. And so really teaching them how to be human beings, not human doers, right?
Right.
But the age is, you got to pivot a little based off the ages.
You do, and from the time they're in kindergarten, in first, second, third, the pressures are different.
Yeah.
Right. Even in kindergarten, I remember my daughter having a few issues with other kids, and that stress that created for her, and it carried over into second grade, where she did not want to go to school. She just didn't want to, and we didn't know that until we explored some things. Her stomach was hurting, and she was saying, I don't want to go to school, and I feel sick, and went to doctors. I said, no.
The anxiety signs that.
And those were there.
Yeah.
And so we spent some time with her, reassured her, spent some time with the teachers, talked to them about what she was feeling in the school, and how we could, as adults, just help support her, not change the whole classroom for her.
Right.
But what are some supports? What are some interpretations she was having? And then my son, later on in high school, he was having some issues with the coach in basketball, some other players, and that was a coaching role for me with him.
Where do you step in?
Hey, son, let's think about what is going on. Let me hear it. It's very real for you. Here's some thoughts that I have. You get to decide how you're going to handle that. Let me know if I need to step in. I'd love to be of support however I can for you as you're managing this, to show them I believe in you.
Right.
You can take care of this. And I'll just support you however I need to do. However I need to do that. And one thing that my son and my daughter appreciated was our understanding that there's a lot of load with homework. And just checking in with them. Hey, how are you doing? Just energy-wise, how are things? Are they overwhelming you? And let's do some family celebrations along the way to take a break.
The milestones.
And so we incorporated those. We still do those as a family. What about when there's a bully? And I mean, this is a big one for parents. They don't know how far to step in, what to do without damaging things. And sometimes kids will say, please, Mom, Dad, don't do anything. It's going to get worse. I
Right.
don't want you to fix this.
Right.
Yet there's a very real problem happening in the school, and it could potentially be around their faith.
Yes. And I think the elementary school just typically handles that a little bit better, like squashes it, I think, a little better, but that's because there's a nuclear classroom.
Yes.
That's at least been my experience as a mom. I think it gets harder when you're in middle and high because it's like teachers have 120 kids. Like, there's not the ability to, like you said, kind of make the world revolve around your kid. And I actually think that's a big part of them growing up is realizing that that isn't the case. The world does not revolve around them. But in my experience, I've really kind of relied on seeing how well the administration handles it first. That's kind of been my go-to. At least here in Colorado Springs, a lot of the middle and highs have a dean of students, which I think is a great middle ground that bridges that gap so the guidance counselors don't have to deal with that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
And when we were having those issues last year with my oldest, we went to the administration first. I let her do that. And we kind of waited to see how the administration was dealing with it. And they handled it to the point where we could pretty much stay out of the logistics, except for at home, back to what we were talking about earlier, saying, here's your responsibility as a human and as a Christian and as just a person. What do you need from us? Making sure that, like, what was being said wasn't getting in too deep, right? Because
Very
it's like,
good.
it does. Like, there's no way
How
it
do
can.
you know that? How can you?
Belief systems, I think. You know, obviously with both of us being therapists, it's a little easier, but
Right.
I listen for belief systems or
The
false
I am
beliefs.
statements. Right. Yeah.
Well, you know, I just know I always screw things up or, you know, whatever it's going to be. And middle school is proverbially known as not a fun time for many people, but I think we can help, you know, them thrive as best as possible. And so listening for some of those belief statements, like you said, the I am or I am not, I can or I cannot, will be a huge red flag to parents of, okay, this is something that might actually be like ingraining into their DNA and isn't just a situational issue. And so, yeah, kind of see how the admin, the school handles it, because that's a part of having our kids in public school is realizing that there's not as much control as if we homeschooled them.
Right.
And then stepping in age appropriately based off of the response.
That's tricky. It's a
Yep.
tough situation. I wish it wasn't there. But I love the steps you gave, and it's really coming to the school, letting them know, letting them be aware, letting them handle it within their sphere, and then beyond that, figuring out what you need to do next if they're not taking care of that. So that's so good. What about, I think a big one, social media and the pressures that kids are feeling around that at earlier and earlier ages to get on social media, that's the only place you can be is socially connected with others. There's that false belief that that's the only way to survive as a teenager. What are your thoughts around that?
I can't believe you've probably said it too, the phrase that I've said so many times, I don't care what other parents do. I've said that many times, which I'm like eating my words as I say it, like, I can't believe I'm saying this. But it's true. Like, luckily, so our older two, a 7th grader and a 6th grader are older two. We haven't heard about it too much yet. I know it'll come. Either that or they just know it's a lost cause and they just don't try. I think that might be it. Yeah.
With it.
Yeah, they're like, that's not even an option. So we have a ton of the parental blockers. I know Focus has great resources for phones and stuff. And that's one of those things I'm okay being like the bad guy. Like, I'm totally okay with them being mad about it.
Make them happy. Yeah.
I'm like, talk to me in 20 years. You won't be mad at me then. Like, this is one of those situations where I'm totally okay protecting that area.
Yes.
I see it too, I think it's just a natural bridge off of what we experienced as kids, which is that, like I was saying with my oldest, what you wear and what people think of you and how you look and how you do your hair. And that's maybe more of a thing for girls.
Comparisons.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now it's just moved into this, you can't get away from it. To your point though about social media, where I've seen it more actually, and I would encourage parents to be not paranoid, but vigilant, is the group texts on the phones.
Yeah.
I mean, my kids know we respect their privacy, but I can pick up their phone. They can pick up mine for the most part, like at any time, and read what's on there. And that's where we've had the bigger issues is like, these group texts are like devolving quickly into nonsense that isn't helpful. And it's like, it used to be you just could be at school, and now it just kind of follows you, whether it's social media or phone use. And so encouraging parents to talk to their kids about expectations, and then laying down the law, like being the bad guy, because it's not going to benefit them not to be.
I think the important part is also being clear and consistent.
Yeah.
And many times parents are not agreeing on the limits. So if you have husband and wife, different personalities, different parenting styles, and that can create such a challenge for the home, because then you have a divided home. One parent lets more things slide, and they're like, man, why would social media be a big deal? And the other one's going, no, absolutely no social media. So important to be united in that. And if you're a single parent, man, it's tough, because you're needing to keep up with a lot of things. So don't create more work for yourself by allowing your kids to be on social media. Our brains are not designed to handle the amount of onslaught that they're surrounded by now. And I know we hear that a lot, and it's probably getting to be an old message. Yet we need to be reminded that there's no hurry, there's no pressure on our part to allow our kids to be on social media and to get a smartphone as soon as possible. You'll know when the time is right for your child.
Right. Make
sure you lean into that and have the conversation, the difficult conversation with your kids. I know my son asked me at 10, hey, when do I get a phone?
Never.
And I said, well, we're going to be building trust. This is what we're going to be building for the next 6 years. And at 16, you're going to have some potentially big milestones there for you. You get a car, maybe date, maybe have a phone, some maybes, because we need to build trust with each other as we hand those over to you and you go. And we want you to have amazing freedoms. But they're going to be, he received pressures. He got pressures from people at school that said, hey, you don't have a social media account? What are you talking about?
Right.
And it made him feel like he was crazy. Like we were overprotective and bad in some way. Yet it's very loving to put the parameters that are healthy for your kids as they develop. And the more you can let your kids know, hey, I'm doing this because I absolutely love you. I would die for you. Not here to make you happy. I know you're going to be upset at me. It makes sense that you're upset at me if you see it as a right. But it's a privilege, and we're going to go towards that.
Yep.
Now, there are pressures around pot. There are pressures around sex. There are pressures around these very big things. How do we equip our kids early on to be ready for those before they come?
I think this is a collaborative effort between the church and us as parents. I was even impressed. Our youth went on a conference or a retreat last weekend, and that was kind of the topic of the whole weekend. And the youth pastor sent out an email and was like, here's what we're talking about. Here, if you want to opt your kid out of any of this, and my husband volunteered as the medical person, and he was like, man, he did an amazing job. And so there's an element of like, obviously we don't want to count on the school to do it, ever.
We don't want to do that. It's on us as parents.
Yes, and it's not the church's total job either, but I think them seeing that holistically of like, oh, it's not just my parents. Like, church is saying it too. And like these other good, godly, maybe second parents in my life, friends of ours that are feeding into their life are seeing that. And so to me, it's that holistic approach that it's exactly what you said, the clear and consistent. Like, I'm not telling you one thing at church and then coming home and doing something totally opposite. What we're doing is in complete alignment from start to finish. And school is then somewhat the outlier versus the norm. It's like, no, this is an area of my life where there's some things that just don't match. And that's part of being in the world. But then these other areas of my life, which are actually the more important areas, are much more in alignment with who I am and who God created me to be. And so I think that consistency is the most important part.
Yeah, and I really think that when we're talking with our kids, we need to talk about ways to handle stress, to handle big emotions in healthy ways. We're going to handle them, and it may be unhealthy or healthy.
Right.
We need to model that first, but then making these I guess rhythms or routines in the family of managing the stress well, because stress will be there, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it helps us take things seriously or to get things done when we have stress. But for some kids, it becomes overwhelming, especially since that part of the brain is so well developed. There's so many emotions popping here and there.
Right.
And so things can be misperceived, overblown in the mind, and they see ways of coping that other kids in the public school system are coping.
Yep.
Alcohol, drugs, sex, all those things that are one way of coping, but a very unhealthy and destructive way to cope.
Yep.
And so with our kids, let's teach them at an early age how to cope with stress in healthy ways. So let's talk about how to get back into the routines that are healthy in the home. But first of all, what are some ways that we teach our kids these healthy ways of handling stress? And I'll start off a little bit, Jenny, with my kids. From an early age, my daughter loved art. And so I pointed out the fact that she can do art at any time, and created some messy spaces in our house.
Yeah.
She could just go wild with it. Either it's pottery or it was painting or drawing.
Lots of messy spaces.
And those are messy spaces.
Yes.
Yet those were perfect for her to just have as an outlet.
Yep.
From an early age, we used exercise or hiking or being outdoors as a great outlet. Another one was healthy movies that we would watch together and just hang out as a family, not consume alone. Gardening, basketball, bike riding, going out mini golf. And we created a long menu of things we can do when we're stressed out and that we want to do as a family. And then each of our children, we talked about our own individual menus and that we needed to use those and figure out which ones had more stress-reducing power than others.
Yeah.
And then going to those if we feel really stressed. And for my daughter, sometimes it was naps. She said,
"Oh, preach.
I just need to have a little nap, Dad." And she said that recently. She said, "Dad, I think I'm so stressed out. I think I just need to sleep for a little while. I'm going to be okay." That rest really helps me. And that's where we want to guide our kids there and also model it. There are moments where, as parents, we're stressed out, we're overwhelmed, and then we're not showing the way to handle that in a healthy way. So that's the way we can help our kids, I believe, in creating those rhythms, those regular rhythms in our house. How did you guys do it, Jenny?
I mean, to your point about the sleep, I tell people all the time, how many examples in the Bible is God like, just take a nap and it'll be fine when you wake up? I mean, literally, like there's multiple examples of that. Good. And so I tell people, I'm like, that's a real thing. But you said exactly what I was going to say, which is the modeling. I mean, it starts with us. Everything starts with us. And I think that can be really intimidating. I know for me as a therapist, the amount of times that I've heard somebody on the other side of the couch say, "I'll never forget on July 12th, 2004, when my dad said this," and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like just this one thing, that's all it takes."
It exploded.
Yeah, but it is that idea of like, it's the bigger holistic picture of what the macro level that they're going to remember and what we try to instill in them. And so that modeling of, I think I read something the other day, I have no source for this, that the biggest indicator of adult anxiety is kids that had rushed parents. I mean, it makes total sense. It's correlative in a way that it's like, yeah, I don't know how you'd get anything else out of that. Yeah. But that idea of how are you guys starting your mornings? I mean, morning is huge as far as for the rest of your day.
It is.
Do you, and I mean, I like to sleep with the best of them. I know this. And I know if I start my morning after my kids, it's not good. Like I need to wake up before them because I'm just a better parent. For me.
You need all that sleep every minute.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love it. I'm like, yeah, you guys are great, pour some cereal. But that modeling of when we're stressed or we're going from place to place, how are we saying like, hey, did you make sure to get some food? Did you make sure to hydrate well? I've got 3 of mine are in competitive sports. It's like, what have you eaten today? Those basic needs, right? Like, what have you done to take care of yourself? Because the joke, I mean, there's tons of reels on social media about, I don't feel good. And they're like, did you drink water? No. Did you exercise? No. I haven't done any of the things that I know I need to do that are best for me. But then modeling that, like, we can't be parents that are sitting there scrolling and then getting mad at our kids for always being on their phones. Yep. So they're watching, and that's intimidating in a lot of ways, but it's also empowering to say, like, God gave them to us for a reason. Like, we have who we're supposed to have. This wasn't a mistake. Showing them, here's what we do, kind of like you said, the individual lists, but then helping them to realize, like, but what works for you? Yeah. And if that doesn't work, let's pivot and do something different. As a family, I think that I like how you said not consuming alone. We've really tried to emphasize more, like, The 6 of us, like, we're just Team Coffee.
Family unit.
Man, it's like, hey, we're going to your sister's soccer game in Denver, and you're going because she comes to your stuff, and that's what we do because we're a family. And it doesn't always work out that way, but that's how we have our times together because the dinners don't often work due to activities. So we find other ways to do that. So modeling to them, showing them, here's how to do this when things are hard, because I think kids have this illusion sometimes that it's just going to be easy.
Right.
And I think we try to sometimes reiterate that accidentally of life's just going to be easy all the time, and it's just not. So showing them that.
Through things.
Yes, and then the family time, like you said, I think is huge. I think having kids that feel very connected to their nuclear family, whatever that looks like. You know, it's okay if there's going to be plenty of people listening that don't have the idyllic 2-parent household. That's not what they're growing up in. But it's like that kids just need to know that they're safe, they're taken care of, and that they're supported.
Boy, I love that. Trust is so key in the home. If you're building anything where we're thinking about the public school system and sending our kids there, if you've built trust in your home,
Yes.
there's going to be influence.
Yep.
And there's something that we did in our home as a regular rhythm, and that's putting these little quotes, notes, and verses in all of our lunch boxes as we left the home. And this is one that I kept, and I put it in my Bible. And real appropriate to what we're talking about. The Lord is my strength and shield. I trust him with all my heart. He helps me, and my heart is filled with joy. Psalm 28:7. I love thinking about that, my heart filled with joy.
Yeah.
And the rhythms we create in our home can create that. And it begins with reading God's word as a family. Just however you can do that.
Yeah.
Spending that time together, praying together, so key to the foundations of the home. Having rest and balance, having exercise, so important as well. And then reminding our kids that they have a steadfast identity in Christ. And then emphasizing the idea of a humble heart, because a prideful heart is constantly chasing all kinds of things. And for our kids, if they enter with a humble heart, it's a loving heart, then they don't get stuck in some of the things that many kids that don't know Christ get stuck on, of consuming things rather than, man, I have a role. I get to love people, an invitation with that. So these routines in our home are so important, Jenny. Any other routines that you would say, hey, parents, think about this one as you're thinking about routines?
I was thinking one as you're talking, and it probably seems to go without saying, but going to church together.
That's it. Yeah, that's
I mean, that's
good.
I'm a pastor's kid. I'm probably biased to that, but it's just the norm now that like most people go 50% of the time, even like solid evangelicals. And for me, it's like, that's just non-negotiable. Like our kids know, you're going to have a sleepover Saturday night, we're coming to get you. 10:15, be ready because we're going to church. And then they see there are those random times, I don't love it, but how sports or a game, they can't go. But they know it's like, that's the exception. Going to church together is the rule. And it creates more of a cohesiveness as, you know, I'm able to watch my children worship as they get older. I mean, that's like a gift I didn't even think about until recently.
Yeah, that's good.
And going over, hey, what did you guys learn? And having them tell it back, because I wasn't in youth, so I don't know what you guys talked about. Or even my younger ones, what did you do in kids' church? What did you learn?
Jenny, this has been fantastic. And one last one as we wrap up is laughter and fun. I'm sure you had a fun home and have had a lot of laughter in your house. You seem like a very, very fun person, Jenny. And I know in our home we had Nerf gun fights with the lights off. We had plenty of times that we definitely were intentional about having some fun and laughing together as a family. Let's never forget that. The kids will love coming home if there's a fun home. And my son would leave out a Nerf gun for me sometimes.
And you knew.
And I knew. The battle's on. He's hiding. He's ready for me.
Yeah.
Let's have fun times like those.
For sure.
Thank you, Jenny, for being here with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate your insights and just really your practical tips for parents.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, if you enjoyed this conversation I just had with Jenny and you want more parenting advice and practical tips, make sure you go to mykidsage.com.